Hello and welcome to another episode of Elizabeth's Atelier. Today we are going to be talking about 7 hacks that I have learned / used to make my digital art have that extra little finesse, that pizzazz, that little extra detail you've been looking for that you feel like is missing. I'm going to share 7 different ones that I have found throughout the few years that I've been doing digital art that I personally feel like add that little extra thing to my art that just makes it look, I don't know, just gives it that extra something, that little extra salt on top. And before we get into it, I do want to mention that these are not to be used to hide, not bad art, but you shouldn't be using them as a crutch. In fact, for most of these, or for specific ones, I actually try not to use them. It's only, I want to make sure that my art piece can stand alone without these, textures and extra little filters and whatnot. I want to make sure it looks good without that, and then if I feel like it will enhance it to give it that extra little pizzazz, then I'll add it. Just because you don't want to be using it as a crutch. You want to still be able to draw well without these extra filters and whatnot. So just keep that in mind as we are talking about these. And yeah, let's get into it. And I use Clip Studio Paint. So all of these can be found in Clip Studio Paint. I know all of them pretty much you can use with Procreate and then of course Photoshop. Okay, so my first tip is to find a good brush, a base one for line art, or if you don't use line art very much in your artwork, at least find a standard brush or two that you can fall back on pretty much all the time. So for me, my art is pretty line art heavy. I like that comic book kind of style, so I love a thick line art. For that specifically, finding a good brush that just feels good, it has a good weight to it, and you can add more line weight to it if you need to, and it has that kind of texture. For me, I really like the as close to a pencil or a pen as I can get. That type of texture is what I really enjoy. And I found a really good one or a couple good ones that I have been using. But yeah, that's my first tip, is to find a really good line art brush. All right, my second little hack is the lasso tool. So I've been starting to use this one more recently. You probably already are familiar with the lasso tool, and if you're not, it's been a game changer for me. So what you can do with this one, and I'll show you in the video, is you can just do any selection on whatever layer you're on. You just select where you want to basically put your color, and you can only draw in that selection. So this has been a game changer for me when I'm doing all my coloring on one layer, for example, for a character. I don't have to worry about getting hair color on, or hair texture if I'm texturizing the hair. I don't have to worry about getting that onto the skin or the clothing, for example, because I can just select it, and then I know that I'm only going to be able to paint in that specific part. I also love using this for highlighting and also shading. It does have a little bit of a learning curve to it, I feel maybe for getting used to it, but once you do, it's amazing. All right, then the next one is filters, which I know that Photoshop and Procreate also have these. Specifically, the chromatic aberration is a really fun one, which I try not to use this one, overuse it, but sometimes with certain pieces, I feel it is appropriate to just add it. So what I'll actually do, I think in Procreate, you can actually add it almost like a brush, I think. But in Clip Studio Paint, I don't believe you can do that. At least if you can. I have not found a way to do it. What I end up doing is I duplicate my color layer at the very end, and then I'll erase with the soft edge eraser. I'll erase for everywhere that I don't want the filter, and then I'll put the filter on the remaining parts. It's usually like the ends and the like corners of the character. Yeah, like I said, I try not to use this one like too much, but occasionally I will, just to add that extra little finesse to it. Same thing with noise. This can be another good like texturizer if you feel like something in your piece needs a little bit more texture going on and you can't really have that same effect with the brushes you have. And then also blur. So like blurring the background is great. If you want that focal point of your character. And then also like motion blur is another big one that I like to use, like if leaves are falling or petals or something like around your scene. That can be a fun filter to use. All right, my next one is screen tones. So if you don't know what screen tones are, they come from traditional art, and it's just basically like prints, like small prints of like something, like whether it's dots or lines, kind of like cross hatching almost, but like it's printed, and you can actually put it on your paper to add like extra detail that you may not want to do by hand. And you can actually do that digitally as well, which I actually got my screen tones, my digital screen tones from True Grit Texture Supply. I love using these as an extra little accent when I'm shading and highlighting. And also sometimes if I'm putting a print on clothing, I will use these just because they're super quick. You don't have to go in and do a whole bunch of like detailed line art because you can just use the screen tone real fast. I love using these. I try not to use them too much if I don't need to, just because, like, once again, I don't want to rely on it to create interest in otherwise boring drawing, you know what I mean? So, but I will use them as, like, more of a little accent piece. I usually do, like, dots or X's. Those are my main ones. All right, number 5. This one actually seems pretty obvious and straightforward, but for me, I think for the longest time I wasn't like actually like doing it. So when I did, I realized like the difference it makes, and that is highlighting hair, specifically like doing like lines of highlighting, like kind of like a zigzag. Yeah, I feel like I was never really doing this before. Like, I was highlighting the hair, but I was making it more soft. And one thing I found that I really enjoy doing with hair is making it more solid looking almost. Because, like, you know, naturally, like, hair is pretty, like, loose and not quite so solid looking. But when you're drawing, especially in more of, like, a comic-y style like I like, having that form actually like gives it like a better look, I feel like. So then having that highlight that's very bold, I don't know, it makes it look better in my opinion. So all right, number 6 is color balance layers. So these I like to play with at the end usually. Sometimes early on if I'm not really sure what colors I want to use, but usually I end up doing it at the end. I don't usually like alter them that much, but sometimes just upping the saturation or like changing the hue just a little bit can really add to your piece, and like you can realize what colors you were using and like how they like maybe weren't working that well. I found this to be really helpful when I would look at other artists like posts on Instagram and be like, wow, those colors look amazing, and then when I look at mine they look really dull. And it's like I wasn't bad at color, it's just I didn't like really understand like saturation and hues and luminosity and like balancing the colors as much, which can really make a difference in how your piece is viewed by other people and also just how it comes across. All right, and last but not least, number 7 is texture backgrounds. So also, True Grit Texture Supply is where I got mine, but you can also download them from the Clip Studio Asset Store. There are free ones that I have downloaded in the past. But the ones I have from True Grit, they give you a whole bunch of them, and they're not that expensive either. Like, they format them for the different softwares. So basically these, I will typically use a texture background, but only at the very end. Because once again, I'm trying to make sure my skills aren't lacking. Like, I want to make sure I can draw really well. But then at the end, if I want to add a little something, then I will add a texture background. These basically give your digital art more of a papery look to it, or like a canvasy look. It just adds that extra texture that traditional art naturally has, whereas like digital computers just naturally are more like smooth and polished. And then when you're drawing, you may not always want that type of look. Like, you want it to look more textury. These backgrounds can be great for that. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new, and maybe try out 1 or 2 of these in your next art piece. And let me know if you have any little hacks or special tools you use in your art that you really like. All right, that is it for this episode of Elizabeth's Atelier. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video. And I will see you next week. Bye!